What's up, guys? Adam back in with RV Returners again with Chris. Again, going through our Opus VIII reviews. This time we're on Earth. Got a lot of cool stuff in this element. A lot of cards that we haven't gotten cards, like a lot of characters that we haven't gotten cards for yet. So that's kind of exciting.
Oh, boys.
Yeah. So guess we'll see if Earth can hold up to what we reviewed last time with Wind. And yeah, I guess just let's get started, right?
Yeah, let's do it. Let's dive in.
So first up is Archangel TT. It's a 2CP 3K category 11. When it enters the field, choose a dual forward opponent controls. At the end of your opponent's next turn, break it.
I don't know. I think this card could be kind of tricky off of like Phoenix plays or things like that. I don't like the fact that the break is delayed. It reminds me too much of Cyan, which, I mean, wasn't terrible, but it wasn't great either. I think the card's probably a 1, maybe a 2 in standard because I think you can get tricky with it. And in title, I actually think it's pretty okay in title. I think it's worthy of a 3. Yeah, not really much to it.
Yeah, I'm gonna go with a 2 in standard. The only thing that kind of sucks is even with the tricky plays, like if you Phoenix them on their turn, you have to wait a whole another turn for them to break.
Yeah,
because it's their next turn after the turn that you did the effect. So it won't count your opponent's turn will be their first turn, and then they'll have to they get to take a whole other turn with that forward. So I think where you really want to be playing it is on your turn, but you could Phoenix it on your turn. It's probably okay. But you could Phoenix it and like block with it and do some tricky stuff. But then again, you're waiting like a whole turn. In title, yeah, I think it's a 3 because it gives the FF11 some removal that it doesn't really have right now, and it's pretty cheap and it kills anything that's dull. So that's okay.
Yep.
So yeah, so a 2 and a 3 for me. Next up is Arden. It's the first legendary. He's a 7CP 9K category 15. He has Brave. He can't be broken. And at the beginning of your opponent's attack phase, your opponent selects one character he or she controls. They may put it into the break zone. If they do, Arden can't block this turn.
I think this card's a trap. I think it's a card that reads very well. And if he didn't have that whole second block of text, the card might actually be kind of broken. But I think in standard, if you're playing him, I feel like you have to commit to him early and just ride out the wave until the end. Because I think early he can just really present a really gnarly clock. But I think you have to spend so much early game for that to happen. Because and if you're dumb enough to play that into like a deck playing Famfrit, you're just out of here. Also, I think Death Gaze could be a thing, which really keeps a card like this in check. So I think in standard, I'm going to give it a 1. I'd give it a 0 if it wasn't for the fact that he was category 15. But in title, right now I'll probably just give him a 4 because I think in title, I mean, their 15 title doesn't really exist yet. But I think when it does, if you could play this guy early, you could just really present a clock that's going to be hard to deal with. Because in title, you want to build up, and being able to just drop this guy and just soak up damage and swing with him every turn, I think it's really good.
Yeah, I'm gonna give him a 1 too. I think he's a bit of a trap. I think there's just way too many answers to him that just feel really bad for him. Like you said, like Famfrit. Even just dulling and freezing him after they spend 7 feels awful, and if you can keep him frozen, like that's going to be really bad. Yuri still isn't going anywhere. There's just too many answers to him. And then, yeah, sometimes they can use the last line of text to their advantage as well. I think, yeah, if you can somehow get him down turn 2 and not get punished for it, you might win. But I don't know if that's worth it. Like, 7 CP, and then what if they just play a Leviathan? I think you just lose to that too. Like, there's just too many pitfalls for that. And then if 15 becomes playable in title at some point, yeah, it's probably like a 4 just because it's going to be even harder to deal with there because answers are more limited. But right now it's not playable, so but I guess I'll put the 4 up just anyways.
Yeah.
Next up is a Pooparoo. It's a 6CP category 11 backup. Cost required to play it onto the field is reduced by 1 for each backup you control. And when it enters the field, choose a character in your break zone, add it to your hand.
I don't know. I think the fact that it can be reduced the later you play it in the game. I don't know if I'm wasting a backup spot in Earth for this. I think if you're looking to get characters out of your break zone, there's cards that just do it better. like Minfilia and Minor. I'm probably just, I mean, yeah, it's category 11, so you can search it off of Star Sybil. Why would you? I think there's just better options. I might actually give this card a 0 in standard. I just don't think there's a reason to play it like ever. In title, yeah, actually, I think it's fine in title because it's a good ramp back up for 11, but because you can run generic 1 CP backups. But actually, no, I take that back. I think in title it's going to be a 4 because you can recruit your characters back. So 0 in standard, 4 in title.
I'm gonna give it a 3 in standard.
Mm-hmm.
I do agree that those backups that you named are probably better. But you could search this for Sybil if Sybil's like your 3rd or 4th backup and then plays for 2. The only issue with that is you're locked into this guy. You can't really break him without other means, which kind of sucks. And I think Earth Wind as an archetype has a little bit of trouble with that.
Yep.
And so that's why they want to play their Minfilias and their Minors. But like playing this for 2 is going to feel really good, I think. You know, I think sometimes Minfilia, people struggle to play her later in the game for 6 because they don't have a lot of cards left. Yeah, she gets you 2 cards back, but you had to pay 6 for her up front. And then with this, you could probably pay 2 CP to get back your Dodaluma or something and still have enough cards or backups free to play them after that. But like, yeah, outside of that, I don't know. I think not being breakable, but it's probably going to hold it back. And in title, I'm going to give it a 4 because I think it's probably one of the better backups 11 has for title.
Yep.
And it lets you recur like Shantotos and stuff, so that's pretty good.
Yep.
Maybe if somehow they got rid of your Eldernar, you just get it back. Or Cam or something like that. So next up is Dark Knight. It's a 2 CP backup category 14 standard unit for 1 Earth, 1 colorless, dull, break. Choose a forward until end of turn. It gains 1,000 power for each damage you've received.
The card's fine. I think Monk is just a better card at more stages in the game. Now, granted, something like this is probably cute with Noctis later in the game, but I don't really think you're playing this for that. Maybe if you're playing like a dedicated Noctis fight deck, maybe I could see it. But I feel like at that point you're playing Monk, which is again is better at more stages in the game. So I'm gonna give this a 1, just because it is a 2 CP backup for Earth, and Earth can kind of toolbox those just based on what their deck is trying to do. And I think in title it's probably a 1. I mean, it is on color. It's not named Scion, but it is breakable. So you can put this thing on like Yida in the late game, increase her power, and possibly kill something. So, but that's where I'm at.
Yeah, I'm gonna give it a 1 in standard because I think there's better cards at 2 CP. I think that's one of their weaknesses, right? Is 2 CP backups aren't the best. In title, I'm gonna give it a 3 just because I could see it being playable because it's on color. But I think the issue is there's just other backups you'd rather have that have a different job type. I think that's the big thing. All right, so next we have Undead Princess. She's a 2 CP 5K category Crystal Chronicles. When she enters the field, choose 1 forward. Your opponent doesn't pay 3. Cannot attack or block this turn. Put 2 Earth backups into the break zone. Play Undead Princess onto the field dull. You can only use this ability if Undead Princess is in the break zone.
I think the card's really neat. I like the fact that it gives Earth kind of a pseudo haster, and it'll let you use some of those dead backups maybe in the late game. Like, I don't know, like you could get rid of the Prompto that you've already used. You can get rid of that Shantoto you've already used. Maybe, I don't know, whatever backups you don't really need anymore, and do this, and it could end up just winning you a game. That in like conjunction with a card like Cockatrice. So, and it's kind of in a sweet spot for like a Carbuncle deck as far as the cost and the power goes. So I think it's a good card. I'll give it a 2 in standard because I don't really know where it's going to see play. In title, I'm going to give it a 3 just because it is specifying Earth backups, and I think really your only options are Epitaph and Kolka and Pavlov, but you're probably not breaking that. So just those two, you'll play it because it's a forward, and it could win you a game and let you recycle your 2 of your searchers. So I think it's good. 3 in title, 2 in standard.
Yeah, I'm going to give it a 2 in standard as well. I think you could do some interesting stuff with it, and I think it gives Mono Earth some things it doesn't really have right now, which is interesting. So I think maybe it sees a little bit of play here or there. In title, yeah, I think it's probably a 3 as well.
Mm-hmm.
Breaking those two backups is pretty good because
Mm-hmm.
you can replay those and recycle her, and maybe in Fire Earth as a Phoenix target is pretty good there as
Yep.
well. So I think she's solid. Next up is Ingus. He's a 5 CP EX burst, 7K forward, category 15. When he enters the field, you may search for one card named Noctis and add it to your hand. And then the category 15 forwards, other than Ingus, you control, gain 1,000 power and Brave. And then he has S Overwhelm for S Earth. Choose a forward, deal 4,000 damage for each category 15 forward you control.
This isn't going to be a bias opinion, but I like this card a lot. I think this card is actually really, really good. He has nothing but good text on his card, from his category to just everything. The word EX burst to the bottom of the card is really, really good. Obviously, you're playing this guy in conjunction with Noctis and probably Gladio. The fact that you can search for whichever Noctis you need in the situation, I think that alone is worth it. The fact that he has an S that does not he has an instant speed S, and chances are when you get him, you're going to get another category 15 forward. You're probably going to play it, and then you're going to be nuking something for 8K. Or if you live the real dream, play this guy and get the other two guys in this set, then you're going to nuke something for 12K. I think the card's really good. Obviously, the 15 guys come as a package deal. So I'm going to give Ignis a 4 out of 5. I think this card is really, really good. He does a lot. And obviously, if in 15 becomes a title, he'll be a 5 out of 5. There's just no question about that at all.
Yeah. In title, I think he's 100% a 5 if the title is playable. I'm going to give him a 3. I think he's good.
Mm-hmm.
I think you just have to kind of be all in on 15, I guess, for him to really
absolutely
reap the benefits. I mean, you could just play like him and Noctis, but then at that point, like, I don't know if that's worth the card slot. But if you're playing like him and Gladio and Noctis, that seems okay. Or if you're playing Arden for some reason too. But Arden already has Brave, so he's really just giving Arden 1,000 power, and it's like buffing his S, so that's not even that great. I think it's kind of stuck to Mono Earth, really. Like, I don't think you're playing all the boys outside of Mono. But maybe I'm wrong. So I'm not like super high on him, but I think he's pretty playable, and being an Anthem that also gives Brave is pretty decent too. I'm just worried that he's going to end up being like an expensive Cyan, but he does have a burst, which is kind of nice. And he only really searches out one specific card, but that card is good. So
yeah, exactly. Both of them actually.
Next up is Machinist. It's a 5 CP standard unit backup, category 14. When it enters the field, choose a dull forward, break it.
In standard, I'm gonna give it a 1 because there's no reason. I might even give it a 0 in standard, just because if you're playing this, obviously the one thing he has over Mustadio is that it's a standard unit, so you can have multiples. But I would trade that for the EX burst every time. So I'm gonna give it a 0 for standard. I could give it a 1 just for it being a standard unit. And in title, you're probably not playing this because it's not a Scion. It is on color, which is fine, but I'm gonna give this card a 0 across the board.
Okay, I'm gonna give it a 1 in standard because I'm running probably 3 Mustadios before I run one of this card, and I probably don't ever want to run 4 Mustadios. So I think it's a 1 at best. In title, I'm gonna give it a 3 just because it could see play because it's on color. And it does give them hard removal outside of, like, Nidhogg. Like, it's, like, on-the-spot removal, even though it's only for duel. But, again, it's going to run to the same issue Dark Knight had where, like, do you want to cram your backup lineup with stuff that's not Scions? So, maybe, but probably not. Next up is Gladio. He's a 4 CP, 9K, category 15. You can only play him with Earth CP. And if you control a card named Noctis, the cost to play him is reduced by 2. And then he has an S Cyclone for S. 2 Earth, 2 colorless, dull, deal 7K to all forward opponent controls.
I absolutely am in love with this card. Obviously you're playing this guy in a mono Earth deck. The fact that he is going to cost you 2 CP every time you play him, a 2 CP 9K that does other stuff, is really, really good. I think this card. If he wasn't restricted to Mono Earth, I would hands down give him a 5 out of 5 for standard. I'm giving him a 4 because I think he's every bit as good as Ignis. And the fact that, Obviously he's Earth, so there's searchers that can get him. You have a ton of recursion, and just the fact that you can like turn one, drop Noctis, drop this guy. You've got two bodies on the board that just cost you next to nothing. And this guy's a threat when he's on board. He's just beefy. He's just a big fat bull ready to plow. And obviously in title, he's going to be another one. He's going to be a cornerstone of the deck. He will be a 5 out of 5 in title as well when that deck becomes a thing.
So I'm going to give him a 3 in standard. I think he's solid, but again, like you're going to be playing him only with Noctis, which again is a good card. I think the only thing is like his text outside of being like discounted and only playing Earth is just the S, and the S is pretty expensive, and it's basically a Iridia S, but like more expensive than that. But again, if you're like playing him alongside Noctis, and you're only playing him for 2, it's pretty good. I'm gonna give him a 4, maybe a 3 in title, only because the Earth CP drawback is still gonna be in title. So if they don't get Earth backups, that's gonna be a problem. Because right now, I mean, all they have is Luna Freya, as far as backups go. But I mean, who's to say?
Prompto.
Oh, and Prompto, sure, yeah. But I think he's gonna need 2 Earth backups in order to be like pretty efficient. So, I mean, I'm interested to see that. But I think as long as that happens, he'll be a 5 for sure.
Yeah. Here's to hoping Cindy is a Earth backup searcher that searches for 15 characters.
Next up is Graham, another great artistic piece in the Final Fantasy TCG. He's a 5 CP 9K category FFL. When he's put from the field into the break zone, choose 1/4 opponent controls. If you've received 4 points of damage or more, break it.
Not much happening here. I think he's going to get a 1 in standard. I think in title he's probably more playable. I think that delayed trigger's fine in title. His category is relevant, but otherwise there's not really much happening here. Not much to talk about.
Yeah, I'm going to give him a 1 across the board, probably. Maybe a 2 in title. But yeah, he's pretty bland. He's delayed, so he's kind of slow, and he costs 5. So, but if you could play him at 4 points of damage, like threatening to take something out on the way out, is pretty nice. I just think there's probably better cards to play at that slot.
Oh, hands down.
Next up is Glaive. He's a 5 CP EX Burst, FFL 7K Warrior of Darkness. When he enters the field, you may search for 1 card named Soul or 1 card named Diana and add it to your hand. And the category FFL forwards you control other than Glaive gain plus 2,000 power.
I think this card is absolutely great. I think he's the cornerstone of a Warrior of Darkness or an FFL deck. And I like the fact that we talked about this on the podcast. He kind of throws you a wild card because he lets you search for a fire card or a lightning card. You have to make a choice. Which deck are you playing? Because I think Soul and Diana are both excellent cards. So it just really depends. He becomes like this kind of flavor to taste kind of guy. Obviously, I think in title he's nuts for the deck because he gives all your dudes plus 2K. I'm going to say in standard, I'm actually going to give him a 4 because I think there's a lot you can do with him, and the fact that he's a burst and lets you search for 2 really good cards is really, really good. And then the buff that those cards get amongst the other cards that go in conjunction with those is just icing on the cake. So I think he's a 4 in standard and a 5 in title.
I'm gonna say he's a 2 in standard only because like I feel like if they're like is an FFL standard deck, it's gonna be like Fire Lightning, and then I don't want to play Earth like at all. I think that's where I'm gonna probably be. And then it kind of sucks that he's the only Warrior of Darkness on color for Noct, which we haven't gotten to yet. And he doesn't really do much for Noct other than give him a buff. Which in standard it's okay, but it's a lot easier to deal with. In title, this card's nuts. I think he's a 5-star easily in title. He searches 2 cards in the title, and he gives everything in that title plus 2,000 power, which is really good. And he's a burst. So I just think right now he's a little underwhelming because I don't know if I want to play him with those 2 cards, really. Because I feel like the decks, at least in my mind, the decks that those 2 cards go in are kind of already decided for me, I think. And and I don't think he's there. But maybe there's some Earth Lightning shenanigans you can do. But I don't see anything with Earth Fire that's going to run him in Soul, really.
Sure.
Next up is Titan. It's a 1 CP EX Burst, Category 11. For
beautiful artwork, by the way.
Choose 1 forward until end of turn. It gains 1,000 power for each Earth backup you control.
This whole cycle of summons are not great. I'm going to go ahead and give this one a 1 in standard, and that's just because it's an EX burst. But I don't think actually no, I'm gonna give it a 0 in standard because I don't think you're ever gonna play this over any of the other Earth summons that you have. It's like a golem but worse.
Mm-hmm.
And in title, I don't really think you need this. It might this card might just be a hard 0 across the board.
Yeah, I'm gonna give it a 1 in standard. I don't think it's good. Maybe like if you're like on a budget or something and you want to run a buff card, but other than that, yeah, it's just not good. There's like so many other better Earth summons to run. In title, I'll give it a 2 because at least like they play Earth backups in that deck. So maybe it's like a cheeky battle trick, but like those guys are already so big anyways that like
that's what I'm saying.
I don't know if they really need this, but I'll say at least it's usable. That's about as far as I'll go. Next up is Noct. It's the other legendary. He's a 4 CP AK FFL Job Warrior of Darkness. If you control another Job Warrior of Darkness other than Noct, he gains 1,000 power and Brave. For XX, choose a forward or monster. If it costs X, break it. You can only use this ability during your turn, only once per turn. And then he has an S, Ebony Slash for S, Double Earth. Choose a forward, deal it 8k.
I think the card's good. I think he's, take away all the Warrior of Darkness fluff. I think in standard, he's just a good utility piece because of his double X ability. It's a great way to efficiently remove Cactuars and other cheap monsters. I think he's a great answer for like 2 and 3 CP forwards. I think that's really where you're going to see him at. He's going to be a great like 1 or 2 of in Earth decks. I don't think he'll ever really use his S, but it is good that it's instant speed, which is just a great solid piece of spot removal there. I think in title, he's probably going to be a 4 or a 5 just because, again, he's an answer for monsters in title. And obviously I think because they don't really have any summons in FF Legends, his special will be pretty critical to killing things. I think he's good. I think in standard, he's probably going to be a 3. Just because, again, I think he's a good utility for it. And I think in standard, he's going to be a 4 or a 5. I'll say 4 for title. I think for standard 3, title 4.
I'm going to probably say a 3 as well. I think he's just going to be a tech card, yeah. Like you said, probably no more than a 1 of and some Earth decks to be able to deal with some cards that they had trouble with. I think the first line of text and the last line of text are pretty irrelevant in standard. Unless you're really, really trying to push for like a Warrior of Darkness thing, which I just don't think is good enough. I think that Lightning has some legs with it, but only because the 2 cards they got were really good with it. I don't think Earth has the legs with it, but I think his middle ability is going to see some use. I think in title he's a 5 because he is their removal. I don't think they really have anything else, so I think like this is their removal that they're going to have to use to be able to kill other things, like hard removal.
That's fair.
Next is Noctis. He's a 2 CP EX burst, 5k, category 15, Job Prince. When he enters the field, reveal the top 2 cards of your deck, add a category 15 card among them, and put the other cards at the bottom of the deck in any order. And then he has a S, Warp Strike for S Earth. Choose a monster, break it.
Again, just kind of going in theme, I actually like this card a lot. And I'll tell you why. It doesn't matter that he's named Noctis. I think if you're playing a mono Earth deck that focuses on the 15 guys, I think he's a fantastic turn 1 play. Because, you play him, you look at the top 2 now, and also, too, what's great in future sets when you start getting other 15 cards, be they summons, monsters, whatever, he can just get one and put it into his hand. He's not limited by character, which I think is huge moving forward. But I'll tell you right now, nothing's going to feel better than playing this guy on 1, flipping the 2 over, ripping a Gladio off the top, slamming that guy for another 2, because you essentially at that point played one of the 2 for free when you think about it. And then another instant speed S, which I think is good because that S will be as good as monsters are in the meta. So I think he's a solid 4 for standard good. Obviously, it's the deck that you're in, and obviously if you're playing Ignis, you're playing Gladio. I think you're playing 3 of this guy because the burst is relevant. The just being able to play him on 1, then flipping a Gladio, you feel like you're in a good spot. Like that's a board your opponent immediately has to answer, or you're on a clock. And I think in title it's another one that's probably a good. I think in title actually because you'll be playing a lot of 15 cards, he might actually be a 5 because you're just essentially playing him for free every turn, every time you play him. So 4 in standard, 5 in title.
Yeah, I'm gonna give him I'm gonna give him a 2 in standard. Only because like the 3 CP is a better card. But yeah, if he hits and like you get Gladio off the top, that's gonna be like the nuts for sure. And you're gonna feel really good about it. The fact that he only gets 2 cards in standard, he's pretty likely to whiff, which kind of sucks. But I mean, he's a 2 CP, so if he whiffs, you don't feel terrible. But I've riffed Minia Realms, and that feels not good. And she's an EX burst that looks at the top 5. The S, yeah, I think it's as relevant as monsters are for sure. The fact that he has an S, I think, saves him a little bit for me. But I think the big issue is he's just not good later in the game because you want to have the other Noctis down. And if somehow you get stuck with this on your board late in the game and you need to put the other Noctis down, it might hurt you a little bit. If your opponent kind of knows that or can like sense that you're trying to get that down. But if you play smart, I think you can kind of play around that and it's fine.
Right, and I will say this too. Obviously, if you play this guy off of Ignis, he's going to be a 6K. If you've got in a cross out, he'll be a 7K. So really, when you're, if you're playing this guy in the mid game before, if you're not in a position where you need to play the Bully Noctis, you can play this guy, and you've got a 2 CP 7K with Brave, which you don't mind swinging into, and maybe forcing them to trade into him or something like that. Or you can use him to Hecaton chair something to get him off the board, then play the other Noctis. So I think there are, but again, I think you're playing these guys in Mono Earth. So I think there's a lot there's a lot more to them, and once they're all on the board together, it becomes a super flavorful package, and they all work very well together. Now that we've covered all 3 of them, I figure I'd go off on that little tangent real quick. Yeah. So I think they're all good cards.
Yeah, no, I think they're solid. I just think that they're pretty passive in what they do, right? And I think at least if the meta for the last couple sets have said anything, it's like being passive can kind of bite you a little bit. I think that's the only thing that kind of makes me wary of them, but I think they're solid. And then in Tidal, I think he's a 5 out of 5 because if Tidal becomes playable, he's never whiffing, so he's essentially free. He's essentially free. And if they ever print 15 summons, that's going to be really good for him for sure too.
Yep.
Next up is Luminous Puma. It's a 5 CP category 13 monster. When it enters the field, choose a forward in your break zone, add it to your hand, put it into the break zone. Choose a forward or backup in your break zone and add it to your hand.
I think it's a fine limited card. I don't know what kind of standard play it'll see just because it is a little pricey. I think the fact that it is category 13 might save it a little bit because if you're running like a monsters deck with this and Sarah, you can opt to not break it until after you've done your Sarah shenanigans. Because you don't necessarily have to tap it. You could tap it to Sarah's ability, then once that's all done, break it and get something back. I think it's fine. I think in standard, I'm going to give it a 1. I could see it as a 2, depending on how the deck shapes up around it. In 13 title, I'm going to give it a 1 because I don't really think you're using it. However, I could argue the fact that 13 doesn't really have any recursion, and this does give them some recursion. So I could easily see it being as like a 2 or a 3, but the trouble will be making room for it.
Yeah, in standard, I'm going to give it a 1. I think it's just too expensive. 5 is a lot for a card that's I'm not tapping to get CP for, and I'm not swinging to do damage. So that's kind of hard for me to put in a deck. I mean, yeah, it can kind of make up for most of its cost, and with Mira, you can make it like pseudo free, but you also have to pay 2 CP for the Mira, so like. And then this card has to be in your deck, so it's just a lot. In title, I'm gonna give it a 3 just because 13 doesn't have a lot of recursion, and I feel like getting lightnings back at the right time to maybe like be able to blink your 5 CP lightning, or getting back like anything, or a snow out of your break zone to play another snow or something like that could be very good. But I mean, it still comes with a high price tag for sure. Next is Fenrir. It's a 2 CP category 9 summon. When you cast it, you may pay an extra 2. Choose one light forward or dark forward and break it, and then if you pay the extra cost, remove it from the game instead.
I don't know. If we had sideboards in this game, I think it would be fantastic. I don't think it sees really any play in standard unless light and dark cards become like this really big thing. Obviously, they should have the artwork should have just been like the Ghostbuster symbol with Gaudas in the middle of it, because I really feel like that's what it's for. I'm going to give it a 2 just because of the implications with Gaudis and maybe even something like Yuri. But I don't really see you running more than like one of these. And I think in title, it's being a 9 card. I think it's actually good in title. I'm gonna give it a I'll give it a 3 in title because it just lets you deal with stuff like Light Vaughn. It lets you deal with like Light Cloud and Dark Sephiroth. It lets you deal with the big light and dark beaters in the categories.
Yeah, I'm gonna give it a 3 across the board. I think it's an interesting tech card because more often than not, you're netting off killing something with this, except for Gaudis, and even then, I'm gonna pay 4 CP to remove that guy from the game every time. I do think you're right though. You're never gonna play more than one of this card. It's just a tech card, but I think Earth can be the element that gets away with it through things like Iridia if you want to search it, or Agito if you need to discard it early and get it back. I think the problem is it's gonna take up your slot where like your hecatons would be, and you have to kind of determine if it's like worth it, if the meta calls for it. But I do think it's very efficient, and if you pay 2 to kill a Cam, that feels pretty good. Like if you can kill him before he changes color, I think that's gonna be really good. And just removing Gaudis from the game is gonna be also really good. Like Gaudis players are gonna have to kind of be a little afraid of this. I don't think you're gonna see it everywhere, but like usually when you play Gaudis, you feel pretty safe. And being able to remove from the game with this feels pretty good. So, next up is Prompto. He's a 6 CP EX Burst backup, category 15. His EX Burst is when he enters the field, choose 1 forward opponent controls. If your opponent controls 4 or more forwards, remove from the game. And then the rest of his text is when he enters the field, choose a forward opponent controls, break it.
You know what? I actually really like this card. I'm giving it a 4 alone in standard because it can one-shot a Lua. I think that alone makes it worth the price of admission. I think it's a good card because now it's a kind of a redundant effect, right? Like your opponent's going to be weary of playing wide against yellow cards anyway because of the fear of Shantoto. So I think it's really good. I think it's a 4 in standard. Just again, the main reason I'm giving it a rating that high because if it didn't one shot a Lua, I'd give it a 3 on its best day. So I'm gonna go 4 standard because of that. Also, it's a 15 character, so you can rip it off the top with Noctis, which is good. And in title, I think it'll be a solid 4 or 5. I'll give it a 4 because it will be a good piece of removal for the deck.
Yeah,
a 4 across the board.
Yeah, in standard, I'm gonna give it a 3. I do think it is a solid card. The burst is like very rarely ever gonna hit. I think.
I didn't even mention the burst because that'll never go off.
Yeah, I've had a few times where I've played with it, and I'm just like, I've been in situations where if it did come off the top, it would hit, but it's very few and far between. I think you're really playing it for the bottom effect. Usually, you're just playing it to play a backup and then kill something, which feels kind of nice. And then the fact that you can play it and kill a Lua by itself feels okay, even though you're spending twice that they spent on a Lua. There's just not a lot of single shot cards that kill a Lua in the game. So I think that is a big deal for sure. And then it gives you a little bit of a counterbalance to Shantoto. Like they don't want to go wide, so you're able to like take out their high priority thing that they played with Prompto. So it makes them kind of have to play a little differently. So I think you're going to see decks where both are ran. And I think he's going to see play outside of just like the dedicated 15 decks, whereas the other ones kind of won't. And then, in title, he's probably a 4. He's a solid piece of removal. The burst is more likely to hit there, but if they know it exists, it's probably, they can still play around it. So. Next up is Hecaton Chair. It's a reprint, so we're going to skip over it. Then we have Librarian.
Librarian.
I guess that's how you say it, yeah. He's a Crystal Chronicles 5 CP monster. When he enters the field, remove the top 4 cards of your deck from the game. At the end of your turn, you can add 1 removed card from the previous effect to your hand. And then if there's no more cards removed from the previous effect left, you put them in the break zone.
I think it's neat. It kind of gives you like a little toolbox action. If you've got these, 4 really solid cards removed from the game, you could just be like, yeah, I guess I'll take that. And like, especially if it's like a real beater summon or something, you're like, yeah, I'll take that, put it in my hand. Now your opponent knows you have it. So they might not be able to take the turn that they wanted to take. So I don't know. I think it's pretty neat. I'm going to give it a 2 for standard just because I don't know. There's a lot of unknown there. In title, I'll probably give it a 3, just because it just gives you options without, it kind of just gives you an extra card every turn, and that's not terrible. And I think in title, you can more justify the 5 CP cost.
Yeah, I'm gonna give it a 1 because it costs 5 and because the removed cards are shown to the opponent.
Yeah.
In title, I'll give it a 2 just because, like, yeah, it lets you draw an extra card every turn, which is cool.
Yep.
But it does still cost 5, which is not cheap.
Yep.
So. Next is Marlene. It's a 4 CP EX burst, category 7. When it enters the field, choose one card named Aerith or Cloud or Tifa or Barrett in your break zone, add to your hand.
The cutest artwork in the game, that's for sure.
Yeah, it's from the instruction manual, I believe.
Yeah. Yeah, I think this card's actually really good. I think if you're playing a 7 deck with Earth, I think it's at least a 2 of. Because if you look at all the names on the card, it's all the relevant names: Aerith, Cloud, Tifa, Barrett. I think those are obviously Vincent is one that you're not going to see on there, but still, I think the names that are on this card that you can get back, because also it's important that it's card name. So if you're playing Earth Wind with Planet Protector, she can let you recycle your Planet Protectors.
Mm-hmm.
Which I think is good. Being able to recycle the Light Cloud, being able to recycle Water Kicks or whatever Tifa special you're using, being able to get your new Barrett back, which we'll talk about here in a little bit. I think that's good too. I think, and the fact that it's a burst, I think that alone makes the card worth it. So in standard, I'm gonna give it a 3, just because clearly you're playing these cards in that deck, so you are limited in what you can do. I think in title, it might actually be a 5.
Yeah, in standard, I'm gonna probably give it a 3 too, just because it's limited to decks that run these cards, and outside of Cloud, like, and Aerith, I guess too. But the thing is, in decks with Planet Protector, I don't think you're really running this. Maybe if Earth Wind 7 is a thing, but then you're not running the forward in that case.
Right.
Yeah, but the other cards she recycles are great. In title, this is 100% a 5. This is a 2 CP backup in title every time. I'm gonna get something back every time. Yeah, in title, I think it's nuts because you can play all these things onto the field, and it lets you get back maybe the Cloud you just lost to play it back again. It lets you get a special back for any of these cards if you're playing their special versions. Yeah, I think she's really, really good in title. It's kind of solid in standard.
Yeah.
Next is Moogle Knight. He's a 3 CP 5K standard unit. Tactics Advance 1. He has Brave. If he's dealt damage by a forward, reduce it by 3,000 instead. And if he forms a party, if a forward forms a party with Moogle Knight and receives damage, reduce the damage by 3,000 instead.
I still like this card. It's definitely not as good as we had initially thought because it still does get hit by summons. But I still think if you're playing a Carbuncle deck, I think this card is just an absolute beater in there because in that kind of deck, this guy's a free point of damage every time. Because I think. And even if you've got like a Diabolos, I don't think you block this guy, especially if especially at the point when like the cat's out of the bag and you're playing a Carbuncle deck, you're not blocking this guy. You're just taking that, unless you're blocking it with your own Moogle Knight and you're playing the same thing. Surprise.
Yeah.
I think the card's good. I think it's a solid 3. It being a standard unit, I think is really solid and it's a 3 CP standard unit, which makes it a great gladiator target. The fact that it's multi-unit. Again, it's at that sweet spot where, Carbuncle just loves this guy. Carbuncle Graviton is just meant for a card like this. So I think in standard, I'm going to give it a 3 just because, it's I think it's really going to shine in a Carbuncle deck. That's probably about it. And in title, I don't really know. I don't really see. Well, it depends. But the problem is in title, most of the guys get bigger than 8K, so he's probably a 2 in title when the time comes, unless you can find a way to buff him.
Right.
Because I think the bigger he is, it makes him better against some of the bigger forwards in the other titles.
Yeah, I'm gonna give him a 3 across the board. I think in title he's just kind of a solid standard unit. But yeah, not much else. Like, he's less abusable there because you have less things that you can do with him. And then, in standard, I think he has a lot of tricky things he can do, which is pretty cool. If you ever are in the position where you get 2 Moogle Knights out and you party attack, I don't think you're ever blocking that.
No, not at all.
Ever. I don't care what deck they're playing. Like, all damage for forward is reduced by 6K. Like,
Yeah,
Yeah,
I do think them having Brave is really good.
I think Brave is what makes it still pretty decent. But yeah, the fact that it was mistranslated at first was a little disappointing, but I think it's still a solid card.
Yep, I agree.
Next is Monk. It's a 2 CP standard unit backup, category 14. Dole, put it in the break zone, choose a forward. Until end of turn, it gains 3,000 power and Brave, and you can only use this ability during your main phase.
Card's not great because you have to use it during your main phase. It kind of takes all the trickiness out of it. The fact that it's just a tap and break could be okay. I think in standard it probably won't see any play because the other Monk exists. So I'm gonna give it a 1 for standard. In title, I'll actually give it a 3 because it can just break itself, and I think it's a great card to just slap onto Yida before she attacks. That's really about it. So I'll give it a 2 in standard. Sorry, a 1 in standard, a 2 in title. Sorry.
Yeah, I'm gonna give it a 1 in standard as well. You're just not probably gonna play it. I'm gonna give it a 3 in title. I think it's just solid there. Like the fact that it can just break itself for no extra cost to make your guy bigger, even though you're gonna swing and then it keeps it up for defense. Like 14 doesn't have a lot of tricky things to do, so having their big dudes be able to attack and block is gonna be pretty nice. So they do have Momodi in there, so maybe now you're gonna have like access to double Brave, which is cool.
Yeah, for sure.
That's about it. But then again, you're foregoing Scion stuff to do that. So next up is Lyle or Lale. I'm not really sure how to say it.
I'm Lyle.
So he's a 2 CP FFCC backup. Adult, put him in the break zone. Choose a summon 4 or less. Cancel its effect.
This card's amazing. It's a 5 out of 5. I think it might be the best 2 CP Earth backup printed. And surprise, surprise, it's a Crystal Chronicles card. Who'd have thought it'd be a good card? The fact that it just tap break, the fact that it catches 4 or less is huge because there's so many things that like the water summoner misses that this guy hits that it could just be, like it's a card that when you see it there, like you're like, oh, I can't do this now. I can't do this. And that would be really, really good for me. I think it's great. I think it's like an instant 2 in every Earth deck you're playing. Like when I say any Earth deck, I'm not talking about, I don't think it might go as like maybe a 1 in like Earth Wind, but I do think in like Mono Earth, Earth Water, you're playing at least 2 of this guy.
Yeah.
I think in title, he's also a 5 out of 5.
Yeah, I'm gonna give him a 5 across the board too. I think he's just really solid. The only drawback that he doesn't have over Summoner, I guess, is that he's not a standard unit, like he's not multi-unit. But he hit the 1 extra cost that he hits is super nice. And yeah, in Earth Wind, you can search this guy up if you really want to. So that seems okay. I think he's just really solid. He's bland card, but what he does good. So next up is the first of the starter cards. So it's Cloud. He's a 3 CP, Cat 7, 7K, Job Soldier. When he enters the field, choose 1 forward. If you control 4 or more Category 7 forwards, break it. When a Category 7 forward you control blocks, it gains plus 1,000 power till end of turn.
I actually like this card a lot. I think if you're playing like a Fire Earth 7, I think he's a great because he makes a fantastic Phoenix target. Because it's just one of those things that like you play Phoenix, you get this back, and you've essentially killed 2 things. And then, like it's great on your opponent's attack because like you can block with something, Phoenix something else, bring this in, kill something else, and now that blocking forward's got 1,000 power. So you may have just like killed 3 of their dudes just like that. So I think he's neat. I think he's tricky. I don't think you're running more than 1, maybe 2 of this guy. I think he's good. And I think in title, I think he's batshit crazy. I think he's really, really good in title. So I think in standard, I'm going to give him a 3 because I think he's a really tricky play. Obviously, again, you're playing a dedicated, 7 deck for him, but I think he's good. I think in title, he's a 5, straight up 5.
In standard, I'm going to give him a 2 just because I think he's going to have a hard time meeting the criteria of his first ability. But his second ability is solid. And if somehow you can find a way to play the 2 CP Jesse and make this guy a 2 CP, I think that's going to be really insane. But sadly, you can't do that in title. So, in title, I do think he's a 5. I think he just does a lot for that deck. If they allow you to go wide, you're just going to break something and then make it where all your dudes on defense are going to be like nutty. And now that you have access to a little bit more Brave, I guess, through like the card we're going to get into in a second, it's pretty nice. So you're going to have a backup for defense. Yeah, and the fact that I can play multiple clouds out there is going to be really good too. So I'm going to agree. I'm going to say, well, I'm going to say a 2 in standard and a 5 in title. Next up is Tifa. She's a 4 CP AK, Cat 7. If you control a card named Cloud, the cost to play her is reduced by 2. And she has Brave. And then she has a special Final Heaven for S, Earth, Dole. Choose a Dole 4, deal at 10,000 damage.
This card's really good. I think, again, we're going back to that Earth Fire 7 shell. Searching her out with Zangan and playing her, you're getting a 2 CP with Brave and Haste if you have Cloud out already. I think the card's really, really good. I think, obviously, again, you're still playing a dedicated 7 deck for her, which is where she's really going to shine. But that's what you'd be playing anyway if you're running her and Zangan, because at that point, you're just dedicated to the rest of the puzzle. I think she might actually be a 4 because if you're playing a dedicated 7 deck, she's going to be your primary beater, and she's going to be one of the reasons you're going to win the game quicker. And I think her S is very relevant because she can, she can attack and then kill something else if it's dull, which I think is really good. I think it's a 4 in standard, and I'm going to give it. It depends. I think it's a good card in title. I think it's going to be a 4 in title. 5 if you're dedicating more spots to Tifa.
Yeah, I'm gonna give it a 3 in standard. I think it's solid if you can do all that in a deck and it's gonna be and it's really good. Like if she's playing alongside Cloud and you're playing Fire Earth, I think she's gonna be really solid if that's gonna be a good deck. But I just think it's gonna be kind of too fair. It's kind of where I'm at right now. So I'm gonna sit her on a 3. In title, I think she's a 4. Yeah, I think. Because you can play the multiple Tifas, you're going to have Zangan, you're going to have Cloud. So she's always going to be doing those things. And you're going to have access to even more specials to just kind of swing and then deal something 10k. Like, now you kind of have to have Brave to swing at her. Or she's going to probably kill something and swing at you. So,
yep,
it's a little tough. So, yeah, I think she's a 3 in standard, a 4 in title. That's kind of where I'm at.
Sure.
And then the last card is Barrett. He's a 5 CP, 9k, EX Burst, Cat 7 job, Avalanche Operative. When he attacks, reveal the top 4 cards of your deck, add 1 Category 7 character among them to your hand, and return the other cards to the bottom of your deck in any order.
You go first on this one, man. Finish us off strong.
I'm going to give him a 2 in standard. I think he's kind of weak in standard because he's not an ETB, so he has to live, and he has to be able to swing, so you're going to have to run ways to protect him if you want to play a Cat 7 deck that's going to abuse him, but he can snowball. If you have the deck dedicated to make it where he just isn't going to whiff, and he's able to swing 2 or 3 times, he's going to just net you so many cards, and you're just going to have, S's for days, and you're going to kill a bunch of stuff. But he costs 5, so it's going to be kind of hard to play him early to the point where your opponent's going to have a hard time dealing with him. But if he does live, I think it's good. So I'm going to give him a 2 just because I think it's going to be hard to do that. I think, again, if you could find a way to play Jesse and play this and the other Cloud, think it could be really good, but then you're losing access to your searcher, and that's kind of where I'm falling short on it. In title, I think he's pretty nutty though. He's a little bit harder to deal with there. Not everybody has access to Diabolus there, so I think he is going to be able to swing more freely there. So I think I'm going to give him a 4, maybe a 5. I'm going to give him a 4 just because he's still not instant value, so you can still deal with him before he swings. But he is not whiffing in title. He's always going to get you gas in title. And so I'm going to give him a 4. He's by far the best Barrett they've ever printed. Not even close.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And I'm kind of on the same page as you. In standard, I'm going to give him a 2. Now, granted, obviously, I think you are playing the Jesse that reduces his cost. But also, too, he still doesn't lose a searcher because you can grab him. Granted, he's the only card you can grab. Yeah. But you can grab him off of the wedge backup.
Yeah, that lets you get an he doesn't lose a searcher, but the category loses a searcher.
Yeah, which is rough. But I do think the card's good, like you said. If he was an ETB, I think he'd be a 4. But the fact that it's when he attacks, it's tough. He does have to live, but if he does live, if you can get more important threats on the board that your opponent just doesn't kill him, I think, like you said, he can snowball. So I think he's a 2 in standard. I could see it as a 3, but I'm sticking with 2, and I think in title, same thing. He's a 4. He's not going to miss. He's going to get you gas. Yeah, I think he's a good card, and I agree. He's the best Barrett ever printed.
Yep. Yeah, so that's going to do it for the Earth cards. I think it's pretty solid, no pun intended.
Yeah.
So, I mean, not quite as good as the last color that we showed, but I think it's still a pretty good improvement. Next up is
Yeah.
going to end up being Lightning, so I think they got
Yep.
some pretty decent stuff too. So be sure to tune in back for that.
Yep.
And with
And
that,
I think overall, Earth between 7 and 15, I think they got some really neat packages. So I'm excited to play Earth cards. But yeah,
yeah, for sure. Yeah, so with that, I guess see you guys next time. Peace.
Toodles.